Hello and welcome to the podcast for besthorrormovies.com. That's www.best-horror-movies.com. The best and possibly number one independent horror movie website on the web. No big studio backing, no media concern backing. We are the heroes of horror here at besthorrormovies.com. So come and check us out. Very popular top 100 horror movies of all time list. Controversial often, but updated every year. Extremely popular section called the Horror Freak Brain Trust, where people can submit questions to the besthorrormovies.com community and try to find the title of a movie that they remember something about from when they were like 5 years old. Very active forums, picture sharing, video sharing, something for everybody. Come check out best-horror-movies.com. Today's podcast, September 10th, 2010, part of the Horror Movie Freak Scream Queen series, Adrienne Barbeau.
Hello, horror freaks. This is Don Sumner, the editor-in-chief of besthorrormovies.com and the author of Horror Movie Freak. You may know me as the Horror Czar on the BHM community, the Ossuary. And I am here today with the lovely, the talented, and the Scream Queen extraordinaire, Adrienne Barbeau. Adrienne Barbeau is an American actress, singer, author, and international sex symbol. Ms. Barbeau's creative career spans mediums and genres, including a Tony Award nomination for her portrayal as Tough Girl Rizzo in Grease on Broadway, playing opposite Bea Arthur in television's cutting-edge series Maude, and a horror and sci-fi film credit list with directors including George Romero, John Carpenter, and Wes Craven. Ms. Barbeau is a folk recording artist, a sexy pinup girl, scream queen diva, and best-selling author herself. The sequel to her popular novel Vampires of Hollywood, titled Love Bites, is in bookstores now. So Adrienne Barbeau, welcome.
Well, thank you. What a wonderful introduction.
Well, you probably
thought of myself as an international, whatever you said, sex symbol.
You're quite popular with those of us in the horror genre, and I've kind of wondered over the years, because I'll tell you, you've been in my consciousness since really most of my life, in the 70s and with when actually I can't remember exactly the date that you had your sexy pinup poster.
It was about 79, I think.
Okay, and then that was the same year as Lonnie Anderson and Barbie Benton and Cheryl Tiegs, and those are all of the dream women, Adrienne Barbeau included, from right when I was going through adolescence. So international sex symbol you will always be to me.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
So,
and if you've still got that poster, you should put it away someplace, because there's very few of them, and it's probably a collector's item.
Yeah, I don't know if I do. It's probably in the attic somewhere at home. I probably had to put it up at some point, or maybe my dad has it.
My mother kept hers on the wall of her bathroom.
Oh, really?
Every time you sat down in the bathroom, it was like there was this picture staring at you. It was fairly bizarre.
And you couldn't figure out why all the guests had to use the restroom so often.
Yeah.
So at what point in your life did you know that you were going to be a performer? You've done so many things. You've broken into so many different creative mediums and outlets. At what point did Adrienne Barbeau say, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put myself out there, and I'm going to be creative"?
Well, my mother started me singing and taking voice lessons and things like that when I was still in grammar school. And when I was in high school, I started doing musical comedy with a very successful, sort of $1 million community theater in San Jose, California.
Okay.
And, I mean, it was just that's what I did. I did musical comedies. And that organization had a musical comedy review that I was part of that applied to the State Department and got hired to go overseas and entertain the armed forces right after I graduated high school. It was, I think, we graduated in June and we left maybe 2 weeks later. And so I went for 3 months to the Orient, as it was called, in 1963, and, sang and danced for the GIs up on the DMZ in Korea and Japan and Okinawa, an atomic testing center called Johnston Island, and came back and started college. And never really thought about making this my career. I figured I'd get my degree and maybe I'd teach acting or something. I did another musical for San Jose Light Opera with an actress who had been in New York and had been in an off-Broadway show. And she said to me, you ought to go to New York to get ready. I mean, that's where all the teachers are, and, you should do that. And as soon as she said it, I thought, well, yeah, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And so I packed my bags and told my mother to ship them when I had an address, and I had saved $1,000 because I'd been working for a termite control. And I moved to New York, and I said to myself, if nothing's happened by the time I'm 25, I'll go back, finish college, get my degree, and I'll teach. And by the time I was 25, I was professionally employed.
Wow.
So that was the beginning of it. It sort of came out of nowhere. It's the only thing I know how to do, so it's the only thing I've ever done.
It's not to sound gushy or anything, but it sounds like the talent just couldn't be denied.
Well, at least the need to express it, whether or not, I got to New York and there were a lot more people who were more talented than I was or who were better prepared for the journey. It took me a little while before I found my way, but there's always been the need to create. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was the driving force.
Well, and horror is figured very prominently in your career, at least in the minds of some. You've done lots of things, but for some of us, it's what you did in horror movies that really stands out and had a huge impact on us. How did that happen?
Now that you're asking these questions, I'm realizing I sort of fell into each one of these aspects of my career. I had been doing Maude, and got a call that a young feature director who was on the rise had seen me in the show, and he wanted to meet me because he had a role in what turned out to be a television film. I don't know if John had originally intended it to be a feature or not, but it was his first studio film, and that was John Carpenter. And so I went in and met John, and he was attracted to a certain type of female character, the Howard Hawks woman, as I'm sure you know. I think he saw something in my portrayal of Carol on Maude that made him think that I might be right for this character in what was eventually called Someone's Watching Me. And so we met on that film, and we fell in love. And then he wrote The Fog, and he wrote that role with me in mind. And in 1978, when Maude went off the air, if you were doing television, you couldn't get seen for features because the prevailing thought process was people aren't going to pay to see you in a movie if they're seeing you for free in their living rooms.
Yeah, I remember that kind of talk back then.
Yeah, it was, I think probably the first person to make the transition was John Travolta, if I remember correctly. I mean, but it wasn't an easy transition in those days. And here, John Carpenter came along and offered me my first feature role, and it was in a horror film. And then because John and I were associated so socially, we ended up getting married, and I think that sort of identified me with the horror genre. And then George came along and offered me Creepshow, and Wes did Swamp Thing, and then I did Escape with John again. And even though that's really more sci-fi or futuristic, by that time I was pretty much ensconced in that aspect of the film industry. And I love it.
Yeah.
I don't love them as a viewer. I'm not a horror fan.
Really?
I don't know. In fact, Halloween, I think, was the first horror film I'd ever seen, and I saw it, the night that John and I announced our engagement on Johnny Carson, I think. I raced over from The Tonight Show to the first preview of Halloween, and I had invited a couple of friends who, were meeting my fiancé for the first time, and after we saw the film, they pulled me aside and said, "Are you sure this is somebody you should be dating?"
Oh my gosh.
But that was the first one I ever saw, and it made me, I was so hysterical and hated feeling that terror. Poor John was black and blue. I was beating on him as the movie was going. I'm one of those people who reacts very loudly. I just went to see the American, and there's very little in there that's scary, but I embarrassed myself because there were 3 times, I think, in the film when I just let out a scream because something happened fast.
That's great.
It's not my favorite thing to do. So I love doing them, but I don't like watching them.
Well, that's, interesting. So I'd mentioned that you're one of 4 Scream Queens in the book Horror Movie Freak, along with Jamie Lee Curtis, Dee Wallace, and Debbie Rochon. If you know who Debbie is, she does a lot of lower budget stuff. All of you fabulous in your own ways. I coin you as the seductress, and
really?
and a quote here is from the book is, "The best Scream Queens are those who can inspire a horror movie freak to travel to a theater or rent a DVD based solely on the fact that she will appear. Barbeau is such a queen, and forever lives in our hearts as a sexy radio host working from an isolated lighthouse in a spirit-infested coastal town." You are adored by many of us who really love horror, really diva status. What do you think about that?
Well, it's wonderful. And the last couple of years I've been doing the horror conventions, going and signing autographs for the fans. And only at that time did I realize that the genre perpetuates itself. I don't think there are a lot of people who are watching, one of my favorites was the China Syndrome, but I don't think there are a lot of people who are watching Clute or the China Syndrome once a month, And once I started, meeting the fans at the horror conventions, and I you probably know how many people come up and say, "Oh, I just watched Swamp Thing again the other night," or "Creepshow is my favorite movie. I watch it all the time," or "I just showed The Fog to my 5-year-old," and I'm like, and it's fantastic to think that the career has, spanned all this time as a result of those films.
Yeah.
That they are still so beloved. I consider myself very fortunate to have been associated with any of them, all of them. It's the same as Maude, I lucked into something that was fantastic and has, stayed in people's minds and hearts for many, many years.
Yeah, well, you definitely are, and we're all very thankful that you lucked into that as well.
But I owe so much of that to the directors of all of the 3 that you mentioned. I just did my first zombie film with a young fellow who's just getting his start, and I think that this fellow is also going to be, if he can get seen, and he's also going to have an incredible career. And my performances in all three of those films, Swamp Thing and Creepshow and, well, Escape and The Fog, all four of them, you know, are a direct result of having been directed by three master film directors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so
when I got the script to Creepshow, and I didn't know anything about George, I read the script and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I mean, this is bloody and it's violent. Ooh, it's gory. Ooh, I can't do this. This is, you know, and John, to whom I was married at the time, said, "Are you kidding me? Do you know who George Romero is? I mean, you know, he is the master of horror. I mean, he is the, you know, the penultimate director, and you've got to watch this and you've got to watch that." And then I called Tom Atkins, who had already been cast in the film and who was an old friend of mine even from before The Fog. And I said, "Tommy, you know, they want me to do this movie, but, you know, I don't know." He said, "Oh, 80, you know, you're not getting it at all. You know, George has a real specific style. It's going to be like you know, he's doing it like the comic book that it was based on," which I didn't even know, you know. And he said, "No, you've got to do this." So I thought, well, all right, you know, I'll go and I've never had a drink in my life. I don't know what it's like to be drunk. You know, I didn't know, you know. So I showed up in Pittsburgh and I just said to George, "Look, you know, we were going to do a reading of it." I said, "I'm going to sort of, you know, show you what I think it should be, and then you, if this isn't right, you better send me home because I don't know." and that whole character, I mean, and of course, as you know, she's so much bigger than one is used to portraying on film, and George just kept saying, no, you can go for it. You can make it. You can just go for it. And I thought, well, I'm just going to trust him and hope that if they hate it, they'll know that it wasn't all me.
Gosh, nobody hates it.
No,
nobody.
It's the one. In fact, right now I'm doing General Hospital. And I showed up for work the other day, and they handed me a script, and they had my character basically sort of ripping off one of Billy's lines because it was so memorable. So, no, I was so fortunate to work with all three of those guys.
Yeah, well, so in your own writing, though, so they're talented in writing and directing. Your own writing began, if I'm not mistaken, with your memoirs. There are worse things that I could do, and I also read that hit number 11 on the L.A. Times bestseller list.
Yes, which is what led to The Vampires of Hollywood and Love Bites, because I was approached after it hit the paper. Mm-hmm. I was approached by an Irish author who had a very strong background in sales and marketing, and he said to me, "You know, you wrote the wrong book. You shouldn't have been writing a memoir, no matter how successful it was. You should write a horror novel for your horror genre fan base. I think it'd be a huge seller." And so that's what. So it was worse things that gave rise to Vampires of Hollywood.
Did writing it scare you?
Did writing
Vampires of Hollywood, since you're not particularly brave when it comes to horror?
Well, I'd like to think that I am brave when it comes to living my life. We had a fire in our house 2 years ago, and the upside to almost losing the entire house is that I was placed in a situation where I discovered how I would react in a crisis, and I was glad to see that I was the one that was racing around trying to find the fire extinguishers, you know, and that I was the one that, you know, eventually put it out, and that I was calm under all of that, and I wasn't frightened. I don't like when I say I don't like to be frightened, I don't like the jumps and the loud noises and the stings and all of that. But I ended up writing a character who is very similar to the kinds of women that I play in my films, and who I hope is the kind of woman that I would be in a threatening situation. She's strong, she's ballsy, she's takes no prisoners, or if she does, they disappear because she's a vampire. And she's sort of a ballsy character, and
awesome.
So she was great fun to write.
Well, I would think that there's some particular challenges to writing a novel versus a memoir. That would, as you develop as an artist, when it comes, what was that like, kind of writing a novel? What is that about? How did you really even go about it?
Well, I'll go back and tell you how I even went about writing the memoir, because I never considered myself a writer, never thought that I would write anything. I had kept a journal for many years for myself, but that was just my way of, working out my life, I think. And had never considered writing. People used to say, "Oh, you're going to write a script, you're going to write no, I have no talent for that." And I don't know how to say it without sounding like a Looney Tune, but the short version is I feel like I got a message from my closest friend who passed away back in '98. It was a very clear message that I was supposed to take a writing class. Well, all right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell you the whole story.
Okay.
I have my closest friend was a woman that I met on the first day of preschool for my older son, Cody Carpenter, back in the mid-'80s. And she was a film editor, and we were the best of friends. We were, we talked almost every day, and socialized with each other's families, and I loved her dearly. And she passed away in 1998 from breast cancer. And I had met her on the first day of preschool for Cody. Well, on the first day of preschool for my younger boys, which was about 5 years later, a woman walked onto the campus who looked just like my friend. And she looked so much like her that I blanched. I think I must have probably paled, because she sort of reached out her arm and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, Yeah, I'm sorry. You just look like someone I know. And she said, "Who?" And I said, "Well, you wouldn't know her. She was my best friend, and she was a film editor, and she died a couple of years ago from breast cancer." And this woman said to me, "Well, I'm a film editor, and I have breast cancer. We could be best friends."
Oh, my goodness.
And it was, yes, that's exactly what I said. It was so bizarre that I said to her, "What are you doing for lunch? Let's leave the kids, and I need to talk to you." And I probably in the back of my mind was, maybe this is somebody I could be friends with. Maybe, this would fill the void that was left by Suzanne's passing. And so we went out and we had lunch. And in the course of the lunch, she mentioned that she had been in a writing class. Or I think she had been at a recital. It was a presentation of a bunch of actors who were taking a writing class.
Uh-huh.
And Don, I swear to God, it had never crossed my mind that anybody taught writing, except for teachers, who taught you how to structure a sentence.
You're like in school. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know. I mean, I thought you're either born a writer or you're not. You have stories to tell, like Stephen King or Jackie Collins or anybody else that's writing, nonstop, or you don't. As soon as this woman mentioned this class, I thought, well, I've got to take that class. I'm supposed to take that class. So in my mind, always, in all the years that have passed, it's as though my friend from wherever she is, was putting her finger on me and saying, this is what you're supposed to do for the next 10 years of your life.
Uh-huh.
So I started the class like the week later, and found out quickly that if you're going to take a writing class, you got to write. And so I started writing little, pieces about doing the low-budget horror film in Moscow where it was me and 50 rats, and dating Burt Reynolds. And when I had first come to New York to be an actress, I had worked for the mob, and it was a very odd, funny, they were just sort of funny stories,
right.
or that I thought maybe somebody might find interesting. And after about 6 months, the teacher said, you really should get an agent because I think you've got a book here. And that was There Are Worse Things I Could Do. The title came from the song that I sang in Greece. And so that then led to my being approached by this Irish author who had many sci-fi and thrillers and books on Irish mythology and Irish legend published in the UK and in Ireland, but hadn't had too many of his works published in the United States. And when he said, you should write this horror novel, I said, well, there's a big jump from writing nonfiction to writing fiction, and I don't know if I'm a story person. And he said, I'll help you with it. That's what I do. So we sat down and wrote 6 chapters. He said, this is yours. What do you want to do? Do you want to do something like, a ghost story like The Fog, or you want to do sci-fi like Escape, or what do you want to do? And what I read all of the time are series detective novels, thrillers, John
Okay.
Sanford and Lee Child and things like that. So I know mysteries and detectives and things like that. I didn't know much about vampires. But so, we settled on a scream queen, because that's what I know, who runs a small horror movie studio a la Roger Corman. She's making low-budget films. And she's Armenian, because that's what I know. And she happens to be the leader of a clan of vampires who are all A-list Hollywood actors. Orson Welles, Mary Pickford, Rudy Valentino, some more contemporary A-list Hollywood actors that we created. Because you see, it wasn't until the advent of cinema that vampires found their true calling, their luminescence on screen. And so you can forget everything you know about vampires, because everything you learned from the movies, and vampires control the movies. And so that was the world that we created.
Wow.
And so Michael and I wrote the first one together. He sort of structured the story, and then I took over, and I knew I wanted to write first person because that's the way I had written the memoir, and I'm most comfortable, in my voice, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote 2 characters, the detective and the scream queen vampire, who are trying to find out who's killing off her clan, and I wrote them each in their own voice, first person. And we sold that to St. Martin to Thomas Dunn Books, and we sold 2 in the series. And when time came to write the second one, Michael was so busy with other things that I took it over, and I wrote the second one myself. And by that time, I was a little more comfortable with story structure and everything. I did turn to another friend of mine, another author, Julie Smith, and she sort of gave me a crash course, like a weekend in plotting and expanding the story, and that's where Love Bites came from.
Wow. And so how long has Love Bites has not been out very long, has it? When did it release?
It just came out about, let's see, what are we at? About a week and a half ago. And I had no idea how it was going to be received. I mean, I just didn't know. And the first review I got was Publishers Weekly, and they loved it. And then I started getting romance magazine reviews, and they're loving it. And it never crossed my mind it would be perceived as a romance. I mean, it's sort of witty and sort of sexy, and it's a mystery, and it is certainly a romance between these two people from two different species who are trying to get together in spite of the vampire having a lover, you know, and they're on the lam from the werewolves who, I don't want to give too much away, but there's certainly similarity between the werewolves and the paparazzi in Hollywood. And so, you know, I'm really excited because it's getting good response.
Yeah, well, you know,
I didn't know.
This seems like another situation of Adrienne Barbeau being in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time, because vampire and romance is very hot right now.
Yes. Now, Vampires of Hollywood came out right before Twilight, but Twilight hit, and suddenly, I mean, you know, we're all over the place.
Riding the wave yet again.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So what is next for Adrienne Barbeau?
Well, next, at least for the next couple of months, you'll be seeing me on General Hospital.
I have, and you know what?
Yet another genre.
I'll tell you something. Kind of one of my deep dark secrets. There was a time years and years ago when I watched a lot of General Hospital. None of my friends knew, of course, but I did and I haven't watched it in years. But for the same reason that I went and bought a DVD of Unholy, I'm going to start watching General Hospital now just to see you.
Well, now, have you bought the DVD of The Convent?
I have. You know, I have not seen The Convent.
You've got to see The Convent.
Well, the last probably 2.5 minutes was cut off with the ravishing Adrienne Barbeau due to some technical difficulties. And she did give away the exclusive for besthorrormovies.com, secrets about Adrienne Barbeau that nobody knows. But you're going to have to come to www.best-horror-movies.com to find out the earth-shattering secrets about Adrienne Barbeau. Thank you for joining us for the besthorrormovies.com podcast. And once again, come and join us on the web, www.best-horror-movies.com.